I think I had everyone, right? Okay, great. And Eric.
Yes. Maybe I can introduce myself later, but I can share my screen.
Yeah, let me stop sharing my screen. Sure.
If there's no problem, I can just kick start. So yeah, good evening, everyone, and good morning, good noon, good afternoon, and good night for those who are seeing this recording. This is an introduction session for machine learning, where I'm going to cover some of the basic techniques and concepts, as well as some of the tips and resources you might want to use when you want to continue our journey in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And thanks a lot for AI Interest Group for having me here. A brief introduction about me is I'm Eric Zifan Zhao, a rising junior at NYUSH Shanghai, majoring in computer science and mathematics. I've been doing research about computer vision and deep learning under the instruction of Professor Kisros and Professor Li Guo since last summer. And if you click these, I'm not sure what you can see here, this links you might be able to see on some of the papers and projects I've been working on. I also had some project experiences in natural language processing and recommendation systems. And my current research interest lies in multimodality artificial intelligence, embodied artificial intelligence, which is basically robotics, and also the efficiency in large language model training and inferencing. Yep. And also, I think this talk is focused both on those advanced. I see many people have already taken machine learning or are going to take machine learning course in the next semester. But also, I think this recording might also help some of the class of 2028. So I'll keep those concepts short and concise and also easier to understand. Yeah. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me in the middle, or I think I'll take some questions after this session ends. Yeah, let's kick start. So when you think of machine learning, you think of those two terms, machine plus learning, right? I think as human, we are started to learn from the first sight when we see this world. And according to the definition of Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of learn as a verb is to gain knowledge and understanding by study, instruction, or experience. We are experience-driven machines, and through every observation, every action toward this world, we're able to enrich our knowledge base inside our brain, and also react and adapt to this constantly evolving world around us. We make decisions based on those knowledge and understanding from the world and change how we view this world as we progressively grow up and also taking more stimulus from the outside environment. Actually, this is very similar when you see machine learning. So we also define machine learning here by Arthur Samuel, the first person who invented an automatic programming machine back in 20th centuries. He defined machine learning as the field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. I'm going to explain what does it mean explicitly by not being explicitly programmed later, because it might find it different from how you learn in how you learn in normal programming classes. So if you draw an analogy between how human learns and how machine learns, you'll definitely find some similarities. Instead of being driven by the experience or environments around us, machine learning models are actually driven by the data we collected. And instead of being controlled by the knowledge or understanding, actually it is algorithm that defines how the models works in a more mathematical and more logical way. And also the models directly adjust its model parameters as an adaptation to the data and to the training process, similar to our adaptation to the environment around us in order to reach our goal. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, what does it mean by not being explicitly programmed? I believe if you have some prior programming experience, you will know that when you are writing codes, you write it line by line. And if you want to solve a main task, no matter if it's in your exam or in a real world scenario, you always first of all define a problem and decompose them into a lot of small but manageable subtasks, and then solve them in functions one by one. And after you complete the function that solves those subtasks, you definitely integrate them back into one major function and then use it to solve your final main task. If you see this little divide and conquer means basically you are divide the main task in subtasks, and then conquer means that you are integrate them back. You might find this familiar if you have taken data structure course, where this is a simple algorithm used for sort. But it's very different when you see things from a machine learning perspective, where everything is end-to-end here. End-to-end means that when you're dealing with the input, the source, when you want to deal with it and want to process it in order to get the target output, it all happens within one simple pipeline. So you do not need to tell the machine in detail how to do it step by step. The model will definitely follow its original setting algorithms and do the optimization steps to directly get to our final target. So when you look from the outside, things turns out to be more simple and more elegant. And deeper inside is always the mathematical algorithms and that works and help us to drive us into our final result. So next, I'm going to briefly cover some of the basic paradigms in machine learning, where the biggest difference or the two major distinctions is the supervised learning and unsupervised learning. And under supervised learning, we have classification. I believe I can write here. Yeah, classification and regression. Basically, classification is, as what it means literally, we classify different samples into different categories, and definitely we want to make sure those categories make sense and will help us to better classify in real world scenario. And regression is basically we're predicting the exact logic or the target value as digits in order to solve real world problems. The major difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning, I'm also going to show it later, is for supervised learning, we know the target. We know that the result we want in the training data because they are already labeled. However, in supervised learning, we only have the original data instead of having both the data and the label. The target are required in not included in the training data set. That's the main difference. So a more vivid example of the difference between supervised learning and unsupervised learning is here. For supervised learning, we are given the input data as well as the annotations. This annotation is basically the target labels because we know that they're apples. And we have the data of the apple, and we know that they are apple. We send both the data and the annotation into the model and let it predict that it should be an apple. However, in unsupervised learning, the input data is just the patterns of the data itself without any annotation, label, or target. When we send them into a model, we expect that the model can do some clustering or distinguish the data patterns that are able to do some, I think, primarily clustering jobs to help us to define the difference between different kind of data patterns. Also, there's also supervised learning, where the major difference is, again, we have the target label. This label is annotation in the previous slide, and we want the model to learn a mapping from the input to output with the given labels. Things are different for unsupervised learning. We do not have a target label, where the goal of the model is to identify the data patterns, groupings, or structures within the data. So everything happens here is without label, obviously, and we are still able to get some of the useful patterns from the data. For example, in natural language processing, next word prediction means that given a text or given a row paragraph, you always want to get the next word correct. And actually, this is kind of unsupervised because, or self-supervised more precisely, because the next word is actually in the text, but actually we are deliberately take this word away and let the model predict it. Yes. And actually, when we are sending those data into the model, we are not dealing with the raw data. We're always dealing with the feature here, because the modern computer and algorithm can only deal with those digits, those numerical inputs instead of some, because in real world we have different kinds of inputs such as image, text, and audio. We always transfer them into measurable and digitalizable data, like as called feature here. So basically, feature is kind of a high-dimensional vector that kind of capture the information attribute in the original object or phenomenon. I'll explain it with a very simple example. It is still doing apple, and it is still dealing with fruits here. So let's focus on 3 attributes for those 2 fruits here. The first one is apple. Its color is red, its shape is round, and it's definitely a fruit. Therefore, we give this apple a vector, a 3-dimensional vector in 2, 6, 1. And similarly for banana, since it's yellow, it's curved, and also as a fruit, we give this 3-dimensional vector 5, 4, 1 to banana. So it doesn't matter what this 2 or 6 exactly means, because for in this first dimension, the 2 means red and the 5 means yellow. In the second dimension, the 6 means it's round, and 4 means it's curved. But it doesn't matter. It's the digits here that doesn't matter, but the distinctions between the digits really matters. If you have done inner product calculations in your high school, I believe you all have done so, you know that you can use the inner product to check the similarity between 2 vectors. It's very intuitive, right? Because when the 2 vectors are exactly the same, and when you are checking one of the vectors, it's always the original, exactly the same vector that gives us the highest inner product result. I assume that the norm of the vectors are the same. So when we are dealing with those vector calculations, we want those data or samples that have similar patterns or information, have similar vectors. That's where basically we are doing something called encoding here, where we are processing the original raw data into a kind of vectors as features. I hope I'm clear here. And in fact, more than deep learning is representation learning. Here, representation, you can understand it as the features. No matter the input is the images, which is a pixel of plot which is like a matrix of pixels, and the text, which is actually you can encode them into different kind of vectors according to your vocabulary, or the audio, which you can also do similar things doing the sequence processing. They are just features. Everything here you see, you hear, you smell can be distinguished or can be encoded as features, where the modern deep learning models architectures dealing with those features and extracted data patterns inside them. As I write here, it's kind of digitalizing everything in a preserved and an expandable way. I think if you delve deeper into this deep learning field, you'll find how these tricks are actually very important and very amazing, I would say. Then I'd like to, so based on the representation learning intuition we have from this slide, I want to introduce a very interesting way to view language and cognition in our brain. Because, as I said before, everything, no matter it's image, it's text, or audio, can be stored and understood as vectors, as features. So in terms of this, the process of understanding can be seen as the interaction between those vectors. So for those who know the definition of vector space, that might be more easier, but if you do not know it, you can simply view it as a 3D coordinate system as you study in high school, where the vectors here can be represented as placed in the space in that space. So I will briefly introduce two cognition terms in a way of this vectorized perspective. So storing vectors or memorizing things can be seen or can be viewed as storing vectors based on the semantic research and the placement of the existing knowledge structure. So basically, you can visualize when you learn something new, you're basically take some of the vectors inside your brain and then make some, if it's similar with some of the original knowledge that in your brain, you will give this new knowledge a vector that is very similar to the original vector in your brain. That's basically how it works and how I build it. And then generalization or innovation steps, how human invent new things, can be seen as draw new vectors given the original existing vectors inside the memorized or inside that memorized space. It's very amazing. I'm going to show it as a visualization from a TV show. I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes, and I want to briefly show it from here. Yes. If you have seen the series, it's something called Memory Palace.
He's not going to be doing much talking for a while. We may as well go.
His what?
Oh, his mind palace. It's a memory technique, a sort of mental map. You plot a map with a location. It doesn't have to be a real place, and then you deposit memories there. Theoretically, you can never forget anything. All you have to do is find your way back to it.
You always see those locations as kind of the place you store your vectors as memories.
So this imaginary location could be anything, a house or a street?
Yeah.
It's a palace. He said it was a palace.
Yeah, well, it would, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think this clip basically shows us the inference stage of how model works as presented by Sherlock Holmes. You always say Sherlock is inferencing, right? So back to our slides. I believe what I've just shown is kind of something called information retrieval. If you doesn't know this term, that's definitely fine. But I still want to give us the intuition that such kind of similarity search is actually how both our brain works and how the model works deep down inside the model in the hidden layers. And I want to show it in a more detailed and more easier to understand way, because given this four-word embedding, those four words, the queen, the king, the women and men, in a well-structured memory space, I believe it is intuitive to say that the distinction between the word queen and king will be similar between the distinction between the women and men, as those yellow vectors. Oh, sorry, didn't have my pen here. As those yellow vectors can be directly explained in natural language as the distinction between genders, given that all other features are the same. So you can see that this blue vector and this red vector is the feature of king and queen, and this light blue vector and this light red vector is the feature of men and women. We are expecting that the model will be able to form such structure in its memory space by parameters into something like this. This will help us explain and also help us better distinguish the data patterns, and then it will be able to so such model will have a stronger ability in learning and understanding the relation between the terms. And also, I want to explain why this neural network or why modern models are so powerful. I believe that modern ML models are basically constructed by a bunch of neural networks. You can have a lot of fashions and a lot of methods or crazy ones to explain and define those models, but I think deep down, they're all based on this simple theorem. So universal approximation theorem. This theorem actually defines why neural network is so powerful. So I will explain it in a very intuitive way. If you want to see the complete mathematical derivation, I'm always happy to discuss later. And also, I will already drafted an appendix or a supplemental material for you to understand that. So this universal approximation theorem actually means that with some given conditions, a neural network with one single layer can approximate any continuous function. So if you see this blue function, it might be hard for you to directly tell us the closed form of this formula, right? However, I believe, and also it's proved by mathematical, the neural network is able to fit this function with one single layer. That's basically the intuition between this and this theorem. And this is like the mathematical form of this. I'm definitely not cover this here, but I can briefly show the appendix I've written. I'll always definitely send this into the group chat later, but you do need to understand it right now. It's always hard to understand math formulas on class. So then we know that the models are powerful, and how those models learn. If you still remember the beginning of this talk, I say that the models learns by updating its parameters, but exactly how? So actually, we define a loss function that measures the difference between the predicted output and the actual target values. Please note here that the actual target values here are given by the dataset. We already know it before we start training. And the predicted output of the model is definitely the output of the model after we send the input or the raw data into the model and do calculation to get and generate this output. Our goal is to minimize, I think mainly minimize this loss function in order to let the model learn the data patterns from the original data set. So how those models are updated mathematically is defined by this gradient descent algorithm. If you don't know partial derivatives, that's definitely fine. I'm only going to cover some of the intuition here. So this, you can see that at iteration 0 step, at the beginning, we started from this high ground, where the height of this landscape means the value of the loss function. So if it's a red and it stays on high ground, it means that the loss is very high and the model output didn't give us a very good approximation of the original label, original annotation. And this black line kind of visualizes us how this continuously goes down as it iterates, as it continues to get information, as it continues to get trained. So as you can see here, we've kind of find a way to get from the high ground to the low ground, which means that we are reducing the value of the loss function as we iterate. And the way we do that is through this gradient descent algorithm. The intuition behind this gradient descent algorithm is that we are taking so this is the original value, and we are taking the partial derivatives with respect to this variable theta, and then we are getting down there step by step because the direction of the gradient vector always lead to a lower direction. But if this is a multivariable scenario, that might be more trickier and more difficult. But here we assume that theta is just one parameter in one variable theta here. So it keeps going down like this. And meanwhile, the model will able to learn the data patterns and then able to extract more information from the original data set, which help us to generalize to more downstream tasks and perform better. And I also want to introduce this backpropagation, because backpropagation is what is mainly used in more than deep learning, because in more than deep learning, neural network has many different layers. So if you do gradient descent on the last layer, you will lose the traces or the updates of the final loss function from the original or from the previous layers. Definitely, however, luckily we have chain rule. You definitely know chain rule from the high school, as it is telling us how different variables are like interacting with each other when you are dealing with like an embedded function. So one quick example here is we have three variables x, y, z here, and then x and y gets to some calculation and get q, and then q and z get to some calculation and get to the final f. When we want to know how much this x are influencing this final f, we go all the way from the last layer, which is this f here, all the way back to the original x. This all happens, or these are all rigorously defined by mathematics or quantitative chain rule. So later, when we finish all the propagation or all the propagation process, we're able to know how these are influencing the final result, and then how to subtract the original value or how to do the gradient descent to get us lower loss functions. This is definitely, I'm not expecting you to understand here on site. I also write a very, very detailed explanation of how it works. I believe even you can understand even you have like a secondary school level. Oh yeah, you can. I'll also send it into the group chat later. So again, yes. Any questions? So I'll continue. It's a really amazing name. Yeah. So again, the intuition behind those algorithms is that we want to optimize the model parameters in order to better fit the original data, as is also shown on this slide. So if it's a perfect fit, then it is kind of, we can say that the model is kind of learning all the things from the original data set. Yes. And similar to the graph or that landscape as shown in the gradient descent slides, I believe this is a sample code for you to play with for you to better understand the gradient descent. Because in the later tips, I want to say that it's the best way to understand the algorithm is through both ways of mathematical derivation and coding. So in that supplement material in the appendix B, I've shown how to do it in a mathematical way, and in appendix D, or in this code, I want to show how the code are doing this. You might find something are not very exactly the same when you are comparing the code and mathematics, and that's definitely very amazing actually. So a brief introduction about those two plots here is, so this plot on the left is the loss function. As you can see that we're going all the way from the original high loss function value all the way down here, and it's kind of converged here, so we can convert to 0. So we can fairly say that the training loss looks great, and then the model is learning well. And this is a visualization as a contour map of the loss landscape. This line, this is a 3D landscape, and this is a 2D contour map. So lower values are indicated by bluer colors. You can see that we are going all the way from here to here to here to a lower loss function value. This is very intuitive, as if you are like walking downhill from a mountain. Yeah. Yeah, I believe that's all of the basic concept I want to cover today. There's a lot I didn't cover, like overfitting and fitting, like true positive and negative positive. But I believe this section will be enough for newcomers to the field to learn something. And I want to mention again that the best way to learn is not through lecture, it's through your own effort. So therefore, I want to offer some of the tips from my own research experience and also my study experience. It's like mostly this is from my own perspective. So yeah, you can either take it or throw it away. The first tip I want to give is, I mentioned before, when you understand the algorithm or understand any kind of tricks here in the paper or in your class, in your lecture, I want you to understand it from both the perspective from a math perspective and the coding perspective. So one thing I usually do is that when I discover something I didn't know in the paper, first of all, the algorithm or the math is always presented as a math format in the paper. So I definitely can understand from those different notations, those hard like all these tricks. But definitely, after I see the codes there from the like the open repo of the paper, I found like it's definitely become clearer to me how this algorithm works. And similarly, when you find the code format of the algorithm is too difficult to understand, too wordy, too long, you always turn back to the mathematical form for better memorization, as it is always the most concise and most logical way to structure it. So yeah, that's my first tip. And my second tip would be, it's an old saying that practice makes perfect, but it definitely turns out to be true in the CS field, as is for a 2-hour lecture, compared with the 2-hour effort on working on the projects alone by yourself, I believe you are able to learn more when you're doing projects alone. Because from the projects, you're able to get immediate feedback, and also you're able to do gradient descent in your brain very, very quickly and get you directly know what you are doing, whether you are doing well or doing bad, because the debug will tell you. And it also helps us to find our ways to better understand the field. Yes. So I think after you see this lecture or see this talk, you want to implement some of the code I've given in the GitHub repo, and also there's many open source databases that are helpful for newcomers into the field. I think you definitely want to explore it more. And the third thing is realization of the neural networks or for ML models. Because there's a saying that the ML models are basically the red box, a black box. It's hard to understand. We do not know. We have no idea what happened deep inside. But actually, I believe that I think what I'm showing here is kind of like a visualization of what happened deep there. It's definitely hard to explain exactly what happened, what every calculation is doing there. It doesn't, like as I said before, it's an end-to-end fashion. It's not a divide and conquer where we are able to turn and call every line of the code what it exactly is doing. But I believe we are still able to grasp the basic understanding or grasp a universal understanding of what this algorithm is representing, what it is doing with all those calculations, and how like our computer is dealing with the data and the output. I believe it's very intuitive because you can always personalize the model. You can always show an analogy between the model and human in order to better understand it. I believe that's what Jeff Hinton does when he popularized the neural networks at the beginning of the century, and which leads to this trend and this maze of the deep learning and machine learning. Yes. Is there a chance? Oh, there's a question here. Oh, sorry, I didn't read this out. So I'll finish it. I'll answer a question after this fourth tip. So actually, the first tip comes from Professor Shenjie Wang. He told me that it's important to do sanity check for when you're doing programs or writing your research jobs. I believe it's I'm doing it unconsciously. That's the reason why I didn't notice it before. But when you are doing something new, or when you are implementing a code base from the open source report or from others, when you are changing something, you definitely want to make sure that your change doesn't matter, or you want to fully understand what the little change you made on the code how it influenced the final result. For example, when you change the parameters, for training a model, you want to understand how it's going to affect the final loss function, how it's going to influence the final result. Because if you don't do that, then you are, and if you continue to do that without the sanity check step, you will be able to, you are like sailing a sinking ship because it is already going down a very, very weird direction, and you will not end well. That's some of the tips I want to give. So let me see your question, Jiang. Yes, exactly. There are a lot of different optimizers in the field, but I believe that gradient descent works best for neural networks. If you take some machine learning course, you might be able to learn some of the most popular used optimizers called SGD, stochastic gradient descent, or ADAM, adaptive like gradient descent. So let me turn on back to the previous slides. It's a very important question, I think. So when you're doing the gradient descent steps here, different optimizers definitely, as you said, have different speed of doing the optimization. For example, if there's a trick called momentum in SGD and both in SGD and ADAM, where you are able to keep some of the momentum from the previous step as you continue to do the gradient descent. For example, if there's no momentum, you might see the black line here. If there's if there is a momentum, you might see that it is doing something like this, right? So because we are always doing the gradient descent along this kind of direction, and then, for example, the landscape or the loss function tells us you want to turn right here. However, with the momentum, you will still keep going in some way, but this momentum is actually decreasing every iteration, and then you can always choose a different loss function director that will help us for optimization steps. And also, ADAM is doing things in a different way, where it takes the second derivative instead not only the first order derivatives, because we want sometimes learning rate is hard to select, and ADAM optimizer will help us to normalize the learning rate, and actually, I think from my own experience, always give us better results. So let me yes, there's definitely a mathematical reason. As I explained before, when you fix your learning rate from the beginning, you always descend in a constant learning rate. Then you might end up in some local minimum, because an intuition here is that if this loss function is very steep here, the convergence speed will be very fast as it quickly drops from high ground to low ground. But with ADAM, they were able to detect how steep it here, very intuitively, how steep it here, and then it will be more cautious when it's doing a gradient descent step. I hope it answered your question. And if there's something I didn't answer, thanks a lot. Yeah, I can talk to you later, actually. So let's go back to the, yeah. So after the tips, some suggested resources I want to mention, because as a newcomer to the field, I learned NYUSH course in Stanford on online version in Coursera. I found it very useful when you are a newcomer to the field, because it will quickly go through some of the basic techniques and concepts as I'm just doing, but in a more detailed and more constructive way. And also, I highly recommend this Introduction to Machine Learning class note, which is directed by a student, a peer student at CMU. I believe this covers everything you need to know for machine learning, also in a detailed and in a both coding and mathematical way. And also, there are some of the videos I found very useful, both on YouTube and Bilibili, where there are many like pro leaders or academic professors who are willing to teaching the newcomers to the field. I believe that's I believe that's why our machine learning community is thriving. Yeah. And also, we have this classical textbook for machine learning from Zhao and Li. I believe those two guys are definitely pro and SOTA in the field, state of the art. And last, before we end, I also want to mention some social issues about topics. Because as researchers, as scientists, we definitely want to make sure our discovery is not harmful to the society. We do not want those Jurassic Park scenarios happening again here. So first tip I want to mention here is fairness. I believe that you might heard some of the infamous mistakes that Microsoft and Google made for including a lot of gender and racist bias in their generative model product. So that's kind of turns out to be a major problem in the modern ML and DL field because the data reflected is actually already contaminated. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of bias from human. Therefore, as the machine is kind of naively learn from this data, they also take the bias, those very, very ugly thoughts from human as well. So that's the reason why I believe why OpenAI is kind of setting the super alignment group in order to make sure that the model is naked, is not contaminated by those bias and those dirty words. And the second thing is data privacy. Because you want to make sure that you do not have a data leakage problem that will be harmful to our personal right and also the confidence of the public to the field. For example, when you are collecting, because as we all know, the modern ML and DL systems are very data hungry. You need a lot of personal data in order to better understand the customer or the group you are dealing with. So if that is a data leakage problem, so it means that the everyday pattern of yourself, for example, what you ordered for your lunch, or how many hours do you sleep at night, will all be acquired by those in a legal way and distributed, which is definitely not desirable. So the robustness of the model when it's facing some of the text or the whole pipeline process of how the model structured is still very important in the field. And the last problem I want to talk about is the data, exactly the energy consumption. If you don't, I think it is kind of a new problem arising in the field, as those big tech companies like Microsoft or Google or Amazon are competing for the energy used for their data center. One data I can give you here is that I believe almost like 70% of the whole energy usage last year in America is used for data center, specifically large language model training and tuning. So I believe that not soon there will be like a major problem because we do not have, like, not only we do not have enough data for the model to run properly, we do not have enough energy for them to run. That might be an issue. And also as the climate change, as the sea level still continue to rise, you will definitely face, it's a huge civilization will face some problems. Yeah, so the reason I want to also mention the societal issues here is I want to always not only focus on the coding and mathematical part, but also focus on the influence and how our job or how our discovery is going to influence this world. Not like as students, I don't believe we can do that, but also it is great to have such perspective and have such kind of mindset when you start. I think that's very important. Yeah. So, and also, like last thing I want to mention is some of the certain roadmap. This is what I suggested for newcomers to the field. So after you learn some of the basic concept, the first thing you want to do is to find some open source resources like on the GitHub repo. On the GitHub, there's a lot of very valuable databases for you to play with. And then if you check the code or run the code and implement it yourself, you're able to get a lot of experience and hands-on experience on that and very conducive to your personal growth. Yeah, so this is just like a rough suggestion. I believe everyone has their own road, but this is how I do, I think. So yeah, and thanks a lot for AI Interest Group for having me here. And I also want to especially thank Professor Keith Roth and Professor Shendia Wang for helping me improve in this session. Yeah, I believe that's the end of this talk. I can take some questions. Yeah. Any questions? Or you can ask me in the group chat later or like text me personally, as all works. I'm happy to answer the questions.